Okay. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. Samantha and I are here, but we're gonna hang on a couple more minutes, let everyone file in and get ready for the webinar. While you're waiting, if you wanna drop in the chat where you're tuning in from and what organization you're with, we'd love to see that. Awesome. I see we have Indiana and Alabama. I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And if you've ever been to Pittsburgh, we are having a very Pittsburgh day. It is very cloudy and very rainy with no sunshine. So perfect day to be inside for a webinar.
Sounds like here, although I'm in Portland, Oregon, and we normally have the very rainy, very cloudy, and today we actually have some sun, but I hear the clouds coming right back. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. You get like 2 hours of sunshine and like, that's enough for Portland.
Right. Our summer is usually like July. That's when summer kicks in. So we're still in spring right now.
Awesome. I see more people coming in. Just to reiterate, we're going to get started in like a minute or two. We'll let more people kind of tune in before Samantha gets started. I just launched a poll. So in addition to throwing in the chat where you're tuning in from, we'd love to hear from you. Are you currently planning a fundraiser event that is virtual, in-person, hybrid, or you just haven't really gotten to your event season yet? You have nothing scheduled? Let us know. See, a lot are getting back to in-person, which is awesome. I know it's been a tough couple years. It's, no longer saying months. It's been years of this, which is not what I think any of us expected, but here we are.
Lots of East Coasters today, although I see California. Thanks for joining us. I'm on the West Coast too, Craig.
Well, awesome. I think we can probably go ahead and get started. As people keep coming in, we'll leave that poll up. So if you haven't answered it yet, feel free to answer that, whenever you get the moment. But to get started, I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us today, this Tuesday afternoon. I am Melissa. I am the VP of Marketing and Strategy at DipJar. I used to work in the nonprofit space, so I, selfishly also love these webinars because I always learn something new every day. It helps me with my volunteering, so I love these. But if you haven't heard about DipJar, we are a fundraising device. So it's a really cool, nifty jar. It helps you accept credit card donations in person at events, take it to your lobby, set it up at the coffee shop in your community. We do offer virtual fundraising now too through our Spark Virtual, which has been great and obviously highly needed during these times. But we're loving seeing people get back to using their dip jars in person. But that's it for me. I am going to hand it over to our host, Samantha, to get us started for today.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. So glad to be here. My name is Samantha Swaim. I'm an event planner. I have been working for 20 years in nonprofit fundraising events. That is the sole work that we do at Swaim Strategies. And we are based in Portland, Oregon, but we work all across the country. And we've been really excited by what's been going on the past couple of months, I guess even a year now, as in-person events have returned. So I'm excited to share kind of in this moment of rebuilding and reimagination. There's a whole bunch of new ideas out there and new content that's happening and really great new sort of strategies around fundraising events that I'm excited to be able to share with you all today. If you have questions that come up during the content, please drop them here. Heather's going to be back to help us with some hosting, and I will, let's see, I'm missing one window. Here we go. Okay, got my screen set up. Hopefully everyone can see now. So let me jump in with just a little bit about kind of where we're at. I want to build a couple of building blocks for you so you have a little bit of a frame about what we learned during the height of lockdown pandemic times, and then what we're seeing evolve out of that. Because really what's happening is out of this place of evolution, this place of hybrid buzz that is happening in the nonprofit sector, a lot of innovation is happening. So virtual events really kicked off quickly when the pandemic began, and a lot of content was learned there. But I've seen a lot of good, a lot of bad, and I want to share kind of some best practices, and then we'll talk about how they're evolving. But we are definitely now in that place of reentry. I thought that we were going to be in this world for a really long time where we were social distancing and we were masked. We have started to move into kind of a new evolution where events are starting to look a little bit more like they used to look. So we're starting to see a lot more socializing, a lot more engagement, a lot less social distancing. But we were just talking before we began here that we are really starting to see that COVID protocols are still a necessity. Mask mandates have started to come back in certain areas. So we're starting to see that masks and mask mandates are still required in certain areas. And the question keeps coming up for folks about what does our event look like if there's a new mandate, or if things change, or if COVID numbers are on the rise, and how do we think strategically about how to keep things moving forward? So when pandemic first struck, we went virtual. A lot of organizations went virtual. And I think virtual has a lot of different definitions, but we've learned a lot in this time. And I just want to share with you really quick synopsis of what we found to be the best in the virtual space, because we're taking that virtual content and we're now moving it into a hybrid space. So first, virtual events, we learned that really they were no longer an event. We were still gathering people, but now we are gathering people around a screen, and it was really much more of a television show. Amazing opportunity to have this very interpersonal relationship with your viewer, amazing opportunity to be able to speak one-on-one and be able to have a sort of close connection to the person that you're talking to on the other side of the screen. An incredible opportunity for storytelling. The storytelling that we discovered in this space was sort of 10 times that what you could do in a ballroom, because no longer were you competing with the party, but you had this really attentive audience, and you had this really invested, engaged sort of connection to the donor on the other screen. Auctions mostly transitioned to online auctions, so shopping more like an Amazon cart, shopping a catalog, less of a live experience. But we found that the sweet spot was having that live fundraising host, someone that could be recognizing gifts live in real time. Because the best part to come out of virtual events was that we discovered we could steward donors in real time. The recognition previously used to be that folks put a gift into an envelope and passed the envelopes around and gathered them, and we thanked folks. And really the only visible sign that they were giving was that envelope being handed in. Or folks would raise a paddle in a room and make a donation, and you would get that celebration or recognition. That paddle raise became a very public way of being recognized, and it was a way to increase giving in the room because of recognition. Virtual allowed us to do it in a much more streamlined, much more sophisticated way. No longer did folks have to wait for a certain giving level to be able to donate. They could make a donation through the platform directly. There's so many platforms out there, but they could make that donation, or they could text to give. Their name would appear on the screen, and our live host could recognize them in real time. So for us, that became the sweet spot. That was the magic. As soon as we saw the benefit of being able to recognize folks live in real time, to have this collective action of everyone participating together, and to be giving them that kind of elevated level of recognition, all of a sudden we saw that there was all this momentum, all this energy. And funny enough, the thermometer and the chat became a way that people felt like they were connecting to other people, that they were there at the event, that they were engaged at the event. And it became a way for us to close the gap, for us to be like focused on reaching that goal. And there's a lot of motivation and inspiration in that thermometer and getting folks to sort of get us to the finish line. We also saw this fun benefit that you could go back at any point in the program and see how fundraising was going, almost like a telethon. So now we were able to kind of connect to donors throughout the program and inspire giving over the course of the entire program. Typically, most events that we are seeing very successful were still short. They're about 60 minutes, and they were able to mobilize a lot of people by broadcasting across the world in a virtual format or an online format where people could tune in from anywhere. So once we had this success of being able to do this, we started to see that a lot of people were thinking, oh, this is a thing that works for us. This is a very cheap way to raise a lot of money. We're going to continue to move forward with virtual. So I saw in the poll, some of you said that you're still planning virtual events. I think that we're going to see virtual events go on. But very quickly in the pandemic, we started to hear hybrid, hybrid, hybrid. Now that we have tools and technologies, how do we integrate those with our in-person gatherings to create something that is both designed for two audiences? So identifying what a hybrid event is interesting, because so often what we discover is that everyone's doing it differently, and there's not just one way of doing it. So I want to just define for everyone that a hybrid event really is just looking at the idea that you have two audiences. You have audiences that are tuning in through a screen like we are today, and then you have audiences that are participating in person. That's the simplicity of a hybrid event. How you execute a hybrid event, there's so many different ways. And I'd love to hear, as I know Melissa's going to be moderating the Q&A, but if you have a hybrid event that you're planning, I'd love to be able to find out, are you bringing people together in a ballroom? How many people are coming together? What does that format look like? Because so often it is different from organization to organization. It is different from community to community. And we're seeing certainly trends that are evolving in different communities. So share with everyone today what your virtual event looks like. Jessica, thank you so much. Ballroom with an online platform. But I want to share with you a little bit about what is working in the hybrid space and walk you through 5 different models that are a little bit different from just the ballroom experience. So at the core of any event, specifically planning a major donor event, we want to make sure, oh, I have an image that's dropped out. Sorry about that. Well, we want to make sure that folks are donating and are inspired to donating through that interaction, that connectivity. So what we don't want to do is create a separation of audience. We don't want to have a moment where the at-home viewer feels like they're not able to participate fully. So as events have been coming back together, we've been trying to figure out how do we blend those two. And a lot of that we've discovered by doing some surveying, by researching other surveying that's happening. Lots of amazing researchers are out there trying to understand what donors are interested in. And the feedback loop that we're getting is that events are definitely back. People are excited to be in the room. 58% of attendees are saying, I only want to attend in person. I prefer in person. I get that like buzz of being together, being in community. About 65% of nonprofits have said that they've returned to an in-person component, but they're really still smaller events than they were producing pre-pandemic. The interesting thing is that they're smaller, but they're much mightier in their fundraising ability. We're seeing giving is like off the charts. Live auctions are off the charts. So really engaged audience, really excited audiences to be participating together. We've also seen that costs have gone up. So a lot of the challenges and a lot of the innovation around hybrid has been, how do we do what we used to do, but still manage the costs when things are going up? We're seeing high attrition rates as people have COVID go. Am I back? come back. My internet paused for a second. Melissa, are you able to hear me?
Hey, Sam, it looks like you're a little bit jumbled and pausing.
Yeah. Is it still doing it?
It is.
I think my internet paused for a second. I changed internet connection.
Okay.
It is. Huh.
I think you might be
That's
back.
frustrating. Let's. There we go. How's that?
Awesome.
Okay, so sorry, everyone. I have construction happening outside, and I think that they disconnected something because I had two internet systems and one went out temporarily. So I apologize. I'm back up on the other one now. Let me go back to where we were at before we froze, and I apologize for that. So the component that I really wanted to be able to focus on in thinking about how to meet people's needs, since we're seeing high attrition rates, since we're really trying to plan for expectations, is what are the key elements that people really connect to in making a decision about whether or not to come. And the number one thing that we're seeing in surveys and responses from donors is that their satisfaction rate with an in-person event directly relates to their ability to connect to other people and how they're communicated to about that event. So let's dive into that real quick. The communication has changed. We used to just send invites that covered our W's, right? Who, what, when, where, why, and then our H, how. It's so important now to add other communication elements into the design of our event. We need to truly understand what are the rules around safety? Are there things that people need to know when they're coming? Considerations that you've taken or accommodations that you've made? What is that format going to look like, since everyone's doing things differently now? And what are some of the environmental elements for me to consider? So if you are communicating these things in advance, we find that the in-person audience is much more likely to attend, attrition rates go down, and people feel like they have a clear understanding of how to engage. Other research that we found is the importance of connection. And Chronicle of Philanthropy has been doing some research into donor patterns and behavior and how they've changed. And one of the things that we have heard over and over from donors is don't overprogram the event. I'm there because I want to see you. I want to connect, I want to visit, I want to socialize. And having things and activities and games is not as important. It's really about that personal connection and a powerful story that raises a lot of money. So short, tight programs are very trendy right now, and lots of socializing. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is that the passive transactional type of giving has been on the decline. So things like a silent auction has been decreasing. So we're now in a place where we're moving into how do we gather people safely? How do we meet where their needs are? And how do we design to these new trends that we're seeing out there around tight programs, short programs? People have been engaging with really public thank yous and recognitions virtually. Things like raffles and silent auctions have gone away. And the costs have gone up significantly. Food costs, venue costs have all gone up significantly. And so sitting people at a dinner table suddenly becomes a much bigger challenge because we're seeing that revenue is dramatically impacted by that. So that makes a really strong case for us to think outside the box about our hybrid events and to think about how can we create an environment where people are feeling ease, that they are feeling connected, but also how do we keep that inclusivity that we had in the virtual space where everyone could participate? So this becomes a hybrid event, becomes a very community-centric event, a way for us to be able to meet everyone's needs, a way for us to include people regardless of where they're located. They no longer have to be able to come into the ballroom or be in the ballroom. And it becomes a way for us to be very inclusive of all of our supporters. We now can include all of our staff, all of our volunteers, people that are supporters of ours that don't even live in the area, and even connect multiple locations to each other. So how do you move forward? Melissa was just talking about she's on the board of a nonprofit that is trying to figure out, with headcounts rising, what things are going to look like. So one of my first recommendations is get feedback from your audience. As you're starting to design your hybrid event, the first thing to understand is, how has your audience changed and how much prediction can you make around turnout, around connection and consideration for safety, what people need or what people are looking for. We've been sending out a survey that goes to both our staff and board, and a survey that goes to our guests, so that we can understand, one, how do the staff and board want to participate and what resources do we have? And two, what type of necessity or requirements is our audience looking for? Then we're planning for some risk mitigation. So we want to make sure that there's good airflow. We want to communicate that we're reducing the quantity of people, that we're reducing our time together. We also want to communicate if there's any requirements, like vaccine checks or mask requirements. One element that a lot of hybrid events are incorporating is the ability to still wear a mask, which means essentially taking away the seated dinner table option and moving more into like a theater style seating where people can sit in masks and engage in the program. And then finally, determine if your gathering is going to be in person, virtual, or hybrid. So we used to, pre-pandemic, have 5 major event models. Each event model tapped into a different sort of style of engagement with our audience and was designed around what we were trying to do. If we're trying to acquire new donors, we would use an acquisition model event. If we were trying to engage a specific demographic of donors, we would use an engagement event. And if we were trying to engage our major donors, we would use a major donor event. That major donor event, that model of a major donor event, was traditionally the Gala event. It's something that most organizations adopted because it had a lot of revenue attached to it. And there were lots of ways that you could engage folks in giving. There were relationship-based revenues like table sales, sponsorship revenue. There were transactional-based revenues like silent auction, raffle, games. But there were lots of different ways that we could engage folks. Typically in the Gala, we had a longer program. And so we were often looking at 3 to 5 hours of folks coming in and participating in a reception, seated dinner in the ballroom with a program. Oftentimes that program had a lot of speakers, sometimes entertainment, and then usually ending with some sort of celebration like dancing or entertainment to sort of wrap things up. Built into that, we saw lots of silent auctions and raffles. But all of a sudden, this new world of wanting to engage all of our donors and keep folks connected and wanting to think about how to be designing around safety has really started to spark hybrid events that are outside of this box. So I have 5 events today that I want to share with you as different case studies. This one is by far my favorite. I love the screening event. And this is an idea that has stemmed out of, similar to a lot of folks planning a gala and then numbers going up, headcount going down, interest going down, needing to transition to a different model. The screening event became a model that we launched just this past year because we had virtual elements that were already in the works. We knew we could strip back to a virtual event if we needed to, but we still wanted the opportunity to gather people if we could safely. And what the screening event allowed us to do is bring people in almost like a movie premiere style, where they were going to be sitting theater style. They were going to be watching on a screen, just like everyone at home. And they were all going to be participating in the same way. It was a really fun, exciting way to still gather people because people got that sort of fun, fancy event feel. They got to come into the space and connect, but the program was entirely on the screen. Now we're seeing that this is starting to evolve a little bit where maybe there's a live host that is there at the screening that's kicking things off. But then we're still broadcasting all of the content on the screen, big giant screen. Everyone's cheering and applauding for the content as it occurs. Live host that is doing the fundraising recognition in real time. This model of event is something that's really affordable to produce because we're not feeding everyone. But post event, we then invited folks into a reception style. So it's really looking at alternative venues. It's looking at a very alternative experience where we're bringing folks into something that feels celebratory. It feels really special. It feels really exciting, but it's not dependent upon the ballroom like our past events pre-pandemic. So really creative, something different, something that's still allowing people that really celebratory feel. I seem to have some images that have dropped out. Wow, I'm having all kinds of technical problems today. I'm so sorry. Let me talk a little bit about this case study of a screening event. So we had an organization just 6 months ago, and in their event, they had already planned for a virtual event. They were already going to be broadcasting their event, but the numbers were down, and they were hearing from folks that folks were interested in and were very excited about gathering. So in their own venue, they cleared space and invited in about 100 people who sat theater style and watched it happen on a big screen together. They got to cheer together. They got to celebrate together. They all gave using text to give. So everyone participating, whether you were in the venue or you were at home, was getting the same recognition. They were all participating in text to give. It was a nice short program, about an hour long. And then we had a reception afterwards that folks stuck around and socialized, connected to each other, chatted with each other, but they didn't have to have the pressure of unmasking if they felt like they were safer masking. And they got to go home and still have dinner with their families. We got a lot of positive feedback from this event. They were gathering, I think, probably about 5 of their big sponsors. All of their board members were there, and people were raving about it because it was so mission-centric. It allowed us to be in the organization itself, to see the organization at work, but they still got to get that live recognition of fundraising collectively. So the screening event was this really powerful moment and this really powerful opportunity that was very low cost. They didn't have to have a caterer. They had some volunteers that brought in some food and some wine. Very fun way to gather people again. The second format is a live studio audience. The live studio audience is a little bit different than a ballroom event. The live studio audience component is bringing people together in a studio to be able to watch you broadcast. So this is a little bit different because your primary audience is no longer the audience that is in the room like we would with a broadcast in a ballroom. Your primary audience is still your virtual audience at home. This is very popular right now among organizations who want to keep their event really small. We're seeing anywhere from 20 to 60 viewers at a time. But the studio audience is a way to gather people to bring energy to your broadcast. You can acknowledge 2 different audiences. You can acknowledge the fact that you can celebrate those who are gathered and those who are viewing. We still have scripting, we have a teleprompter, we have our speakers that are prepped and ready to go. But the one thing that we have that's different in this event is that we have applause, we have cheering. It's still a very virtual event. It is still live recognition and still a reception post broadcast, but it is not designed just for the ballroom viewer. It is designed primarily for the virtual audience. So this has become a fun way for us to have viewers, to have some fun, to have some celebration. You can see in these events, we had about 60 people in the studio. There's a website here that you can take a look if you want to see what this looks like. You can view this event, avstream.me/tac. the Actors Conservatory is the organization. And this was a way that they could have sort of that fun celebration of people still being back together. But people in this gathering were masked primarily and chose to mask because numbers were rising in this area. So this was maybe an hour program. It wasn't that long of a program, but it was a focused, fun hour. And they were able to raise a significant amount of money from both the people in the room and the folks that were tuning in virtually, because they were able to get everyone participating via a text to give platform. They had this really intimate experience in which they had the audience in the room get prepped in advance. We gave them explanation about what their role would be. We prepped them in advance for getting their cell phones out and ready to give. We gave them a little bit of a behind the scenes experience that by being behind the scenes, they were cheering, they were celebrating, they were applauding. They were a part of the broadcast as much as they were enjoying and giving and participating as a donor. The other element to know here is that we were able to acknowledge the folks that were in the room and the folks that were at home, and see their gifts appear on the screen at the same time. We had another event that was a studio audience. Their studio was not actually a studio though, and I wanted to share with you what they did a little bit different. Because they turned their venue into a studio. They had rising headcounts and they wanted to really control who was in the audience. So they brought together 60 people in the audience that were primarily their board members and staff members. That way they could have that energy and that feel of a studio. They had 110 guests that were tuning in at home. They raised more money than their 500-person gala did, because their 500-person gala in the past had been very costly to produce. But they also knew that they might have a few donors that give in the room if they use paddles instead. So in this particular case, we had our host recognizing the paddle going up first, and then recognize the online giving happening at home second. There's a slight time delay in a virtual broadcast. And so that allowed for us to build on the momentum in the room and then turn and recognize the giving that was happening at home. They did add a live auction to this event as well, because they knew that their board members were typically their biggest bidders in a live auction. And they added the live auction for only the people that were in the audience. So they ended the broadcast and then they cut to, for those of you still here with us, we have a live auction. They had just 4 items. They were very popular items that everyone knew and sort of expected from them. And their auction lasted a total of like 6 minutes. They sold each package for over $5,000. And it was super successful for them and a really easy way to streamline their event. They also did theater style seating so that they didn't have to worry about tables or eating. But afterwards, they invited everyone outside to the courtyard where they had food and the availability for folks to eat and connect and socialize and do all the things you would do in a gala, but without having to be seated at tables of 10. All right, so the third model I wanted to share with you that is really interesting, because I think it opens up a new door for a lot of national or statewide organizations, is the idea of a multi-city gala. So this is the idea where you have a gala happening in multiple locations and you can connect your broadcasts together. We saw this first with the Golden Globes 2 years ago. Tina Fey was in New York on the stage and Amy Poehler was in LA on the stage. They each had about 100 people in front of them, so they had a very small gathering. But we've now seen that same concept replicated and very successfully. It's a lot more expensive because you have a lot more technical needs to do this. The most important thing that you would need is a countdown clock or something that connects all your speakers together so they can understand when they're live and understand when things are getting started. But we had an arts festival that is an organization that folks travel to participate in a festival. So tourism destination, we had major donors spread throughout the country. And when they were bringing folks back together, they had been so successful with virtual that they were trying to figure out, is this a way that we could actually connect all of our donors through different venues? So the festival itself was in upstate New York. They had a live festival stage where all their content was being broadcast from that location, mostly because the donors have a really strong connection to place. There is a history of families coming, taking family vacations at this location. They really wanted to showcase place. So their fundraising host, their executive director, their artistic director, they were all there at the festival stage. But then they had 4 other remote galas that were happening in major metropolitan areas where they had donors. They had a gala that was happening in New York. They had a gala that was happening in Atlanta. They had another gala that was happening in Los Angeles and a gala that was happening in Minneapolis. And those 4 galas had a live host that was welcoming everyone and then kicked it over to the program that was being broadcast to all of the different galas. And that program, again, came live from the festival stage. So it created that relationship, that connection to the festival itself, but it gave a way for people in each of those locations to still gather. They also broadcast this. So if I wanted to tune in from Portland, I could. And it was a way that they were able to, for the first time ever, bring a lot of their major donors together at once. Each event had between 100 and 150 people, all of them very intimate, all of them very celebratory, but the majority of the program was hosted on a screen for audience members, where they also had moments where they clipped to each location to see what was going on in those locations. So live host in each location, but a single broadcast bringing everything together. And then the fourth sort of model that we're seeing that's really been effective, especially if you are a school, this is an area where we've seen schools sort of excel and skyrocket, is taking that traditional gala model or even taking a screening model, having your program, an auction, a paddle raise, but adding a peer-to-peer campaign in it. So peer-to-peer campaign traditionally is that opportunity where you're engaging a fundraiser on your behalf, so maybe a donor of yours, to participate and raise money from their community, from their social circle. So a peer-to-peer campaign in this format is where not only do you have all of your other traditional gala forms of fundraising, but you also have a way that you're creating either a sense of competition or a sense of voting using this peer-to-peer model. So this is an example from an organization called American Leadership Forum of Oregon. They are a program that puts people through leadership training, and they have classes. So everyone that was tuning in was an alumni of this program, and they have this class structure or this class competition that when you were watching the program, either live, you could text a number and get the donation platform up, or on your screen, you could click into your class number and get your class page to come up. They had a class competition that all of the classes were competing against each other by collecting donations from each of those individual classes. And that allowed for us to be able to create this competition where we could see not just the fundraising thermometer, but also the leaderboard. So for this particular event, they had about 80 people in a room. It was just this year's graduating class that was gathered in person, and everyone else was tuning in virtually, and they were all participating through the class competition. There were prizes for the winning class. There was a class ambassador that kind of pumped everyone up beforehand. There were direct emails that went out to every class with a link to their own giving page so that if they wanted to donate before the event, they could. That program still had that traditional fundraising appeal where we're acknowledging gifts at all giving levels and we're celebrating all donations. But we took time in the program to look at the thermometer, and we took time in the program to look at the leaderboard. So we could sort of set up the challenge and expectation that classes were competing against each other. And every time we showed the leaderboard, the classes that were in spot 2 or spot 3 would start to see an increase in fundraising. So this additional element of competition became accessible through a peer-to-peer campaign being integrated into the gala. We have another event that we're in the midst of planning right now that is actually going to be doing something similar with the Dancing with the Stars competition. So they will have their entire event in a ballroom. They are going to have about 250 people gathered, and they will be broadcasting that event. They will have their speakers, they will do their fundraising appeal, and then as the closing, they will have this competition. They've identified 4 local leaders. So one's a business owner, one's a principal, one's a contractor, and then one's a politician. 4 local leaders who are currently rehearsing and getting ready, and they are paired up with a dance trainer who is choreographing a number with them. They each have their own fundraising pages currently actively raising money, and they're raising money in advance of the event. But then the night of the event, they're going to be encouraging folks to tune in and vote for them. And you will vote by making a donation to their page. And then there will be a prize to the top dancer who gets the most votes by collecting the most amount of money. The local contractor was one I wanted to call out because he has been leveraging all of his vendors, all of his business partners, all of his colleagues, and he's been actively raising money. He's raised more money already as an individual than the event used to raise in person as a ballroom event with 300 people. So really fun way to be able to integrate that pledge to pledge model. And then the last model is something that we've seen a lot of in the virtual space, but I wanted to make sure to talk about it here because I think you can add it to any hybrid event, and that is the watch party. So if you have folks that are gathered in a ballroom, and that ballroom is in Atlanta, Georgia, but you also have donors that are in Savannah, you could have a Savannah watch party hosted by a board member or donor gathering a couple people at their home, tuning in together collectively. That watch party model is something that was very popular in political fundraising and has been adopted into the nonprofit sector, in which you can coach your host to be able to sort of be an influencer for your fundraising. They invite and they host what they want in their home. You get them tuned in to the virtual event, and then you get them to encourage and motivate their friends to be able to give. So the watch party is a really fun addition. We've had a lot of organizations that have started to do this because they're statewide or nationwide organizations. We have an organization that serves 5 states. And so they're having watch parties in many of the major metropolitan areas in all 5 states. 5 big cities that are hosting gatherings that are going to be 40 or more people. Each of those gatherings is being hosted by a board member, except for one is being hosted by the founder. And they are hosting a small gathering, but enough people that they can really have an impact and see the fundraising happening from their audience. We had home viewers tuning in, so folks that were watching on their own computers at home alone, and then those who are watching at house parties. 100% of the content was virtual. And the host was provided a toolkit, a script, and they were all sent champagne to serve at their event. And they had record-breaking fundraising at their watch party model event because they didn't have all the same costs, and they were able to raise more money. They still saw strong sponsorship, they saw strong participation, they saw strong donor giving, and saw an increase in their fundraising with significantly less expense. So the watch party is something to consider adding on anywhere. We have tools for watch party that I wanted to share. I'll make sure that Melissa has these links that she can send out. But the watch party or peer-to-peer toolkit we have online with some communications out to your hosts and some tools and resources for your hosts. We also have a couple of other tools available for you if you want to survey or do a risk assessment for your event. We want to make sure that those were available for you. So I see some questions already coming in. I wanted to close with a promotion that we produce a fundraising event conference every year. We have folks participating from around the country. So if you want to talk more about what you're seeing in fundraising events, what the trends are, if you want to dive deep into a 2-day experience, we have a conference coming up. But I see that there's a question specifically about dip jar. So Melissa, maybe you're able to jump in and answer that.
Yeah, Kitty, thanks so much for the question. So I kind of wanted to, I can answer this question that, yeah, you can absolutely get all of those locations set up with dip jar. But one thing that I think fits in really well, especially with the style events that Samantha was saying and how the competition can be great, you know, things like that, is with our Spark virtual option, you can create multiple campaigns. We see customers setting up multiple campaigns, and then you can see which campaign raises the most. So if you're already utilizing Spark virtual, you can use that as your like competition aspect. And with the watch parties and sending them out, send each host a dip jar, get a dip jar at those parties to get people fundraising that way. So.
I love it. The other thing that I would consider too about the dip jar, I mean, the dip jar could be sent to all your watch party hosts. But the other thing that I like too is I think that we have a little bit of hesitancy occasionally about text to give platforms and giving an alternative, like clicking online and donating online. That if you're gathering folks, the ability for folks to be able to just walk up to a donation station or walk up to the dip jar and make a donation directly, I think can sometimes be a little bit more comfortable for folks who aren't used to using like a text to give platform.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, folks are asking about Spark Virtual. Talk more about that.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. So, before we jumped on today, I was talking to Samantha about the fact that like dip jar has always been our main product. I mean, obviously it's the name of our company. But COVID really opened us up to virtual giving. It was so important. Everyone was going hybrid first, I think everyone was canceling events. Then
Right.
everyone was coming back with virtual events. And now we're finally starting to see those hybrid and in-person events. But I think Spark Virtual has really allowed our customers to make the most of their dip jar platform, because if you're hosting, back when you were doing just virtual events, it allowed you to create a campaign, send it out to people, have people donate. But now that you're doing these hybrid things, it's a great way to keep it all integrated, having your dip jar there in person, allowing people to make those donations that way, but also engaging the audience at home with those campaigns and allowing them to participate in whatever fund a need or fundraising, campaign you roll out at the event. You're allowing the people at home to also engage with it by sending them somewhere that they can donate to. It's all the same campaign. They can see the thermometer move up. They can see like a thank you to their name. It just keeps them more engaged. And I really think that that's the name of the game when you're doing these virtual and hybrid events, is like, how can you keep people engaged the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree. One of the things that we've transitioned to recently, because folks are now participating in events so many different ways, we've started to integrate in a sort of running nameplate underneath the viewing screen that shows the most recent donation, because we were so often moving away from giving into program content, going full screen with like a video or a speaker, and then coming back and 10 gifts would have come in and they didn't get the same recognition. So the nice thing about something like the Spark Virtual platform is that we can see that gift come in and we could just pull that little segment into our broadcast so that that can be present in the bottom of the screen when we have a broadcast element. We're typically broadcasting back into the ballroom as well, so that the viewer is getting the same experience in the ballroom. Even though there's a live person in front of them, they can see on the screen how it shows up as the person at home. And so that addition of things like, I mean, it's really, we've moved into TV production, but that addition of things like overlays and nameplates, we can integrate into the broadcast and into the screen that people are viewing, that most recent name and that most recent gift that came in, so that folks are always getting recognition live in real time.
Yeah, I think that recognition piece is really important. And while you could probably ask a lot of donors, like, do you want to be recognized? And they'll be like, oh, no, it's okay. But in reality, I think it's always nice to give them that recognition. Plus, it kind of prods other people to make donations. They see a familiar name come across and like, oh, like they also support this. Great. I love it too. I'm going to support. And just kind of keeps that momentum going when you have that, constant recognition of your donors.
Yeah, there was a graphic that dropped out. I don't know. I had like 4 graphics disappear on me. I'm so sorry. But one of the key things about giving that is, regardless about how you're doing it, whether it's in person, virtual, hybrid, one of the key reasons why people give is sort of this stacked triumvirate of elements that you want to make sure are included in your event, which is the recognition, the collective action. That feeling like you're a part of something is a really powerful tool for giving. Recognizing, seeing that people are donating, celebrating those donations, and then the impact, the mission, that thing that I think we all assume is why folks are giving. Those 3 things added together are just gigantic game changers for moving fundraising needles. And we've seen so much of it happen virtually that now we are retaining that in the hybrid space and even in the in-person space. If folks can see that thermometer climbing, they see their name on the screen, they see that they're collectively making that big of an impact. Their $1,000 gift may seem small compared to the $100,000 goal, but oh my God, they help make a $100,000 goal happen. That is a huge impact to not lose, even as we return back to the in-person gala.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or use the question. I just wanted to reiterate that this webinar was recorded, still is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording and a copy of Samantha's presentation to everyone that registered. So if you think you missed anything, you can always rewatch it. If you want to share with like your events team, your development team, we'll make sure you have that later today. And I'll absolutely include more information about SWAIM strategies and how you can get in touch with them and tune in to their next event. Does anyone, any other questions? Let's see, I've got one in the Q&A. More questions for Spark Virtual. So at this point, it doesn't have a text to give for mobile donations, but it does give you a unique URL that you can send out and they can donate from their phone. But we are looking to roll out more features over the next couple of months.
Awesome. Well, there are incredible tools and resources out there. And one of the things that we have found as sort of the sweet sauce is that we work to design a single landing page so that everything can be integrated. Because you may have your dip jar giving thermometer integrated in with like an online auction with a platform that does online auction. So we recommend a single page where everything can be integrated into one. There's so many amazing tools out there, but if you want to see examples of screening events, examples of virtual events, examples of other hybrid formats that folks are using, we have a ton of examples that you can just click and watch on our website too. So click on virtual and you'll just see a list of different examples that come up, but some fun events that have been going on and really creative solutions that people are identifying. The big, I think, thing to consider as numbers change and mask mandates change, the biggest thing to consider is how you're serving food. That's the number one sort of conundrum that folks are up against is if you pull food out of your program element and you make your program separate, it's easier for you then to have reception style food or food post program that allows for that socializing, that connection, that engagement in an environment where people can choose their distance and also choose if they stick around for it. So a lot of hybrid events are focused on program first and food second as a solution.
I see one last question.
Yeah.
Just going to answer it. It's another dip jar question.
Yeah.
But for the dip jar, so you preset the amount on the actual device, but you can absolutely change that throughout the event. It's a very simple product. So you simply unplug, plug it in, and when it refreshes, it will boot back up to that new number. But we also see a lot of organizations using multiple dip jars. So setting them at different amounts. Because like Samantha was saying, you want to make sure that no matter how much the donor is able to give, they feel engaged through their event and equally recognized. So maybe you have some dip jars set out at lower amounts, and then you have a few that are set at higher. So no matter what they're comfortable giving, they're able to engage in the process of making that donation during your event.
I think the big thing that's changed in fundraising world is gone are the days of cash and check collection. We moved so much more into using technology to collect via credit card payment. And so I see that Kitty has a note that she has a conference coming up. That's an example of a great way that you could start to integrate fundraising by bringing your dip jar to the conference. And even you may have, like Melissa was just saying, multiple different locations or different jar dollar amounts. You might consider within your conference, do you have 3 jars lined up at different giving levels and the donation station, or do you have different jars at different locations for different participation? We are seeing fundraising integrated so often into other types of events, educational programming, conferences, things like that, because of the fact that it's gone so mobile and it's gone so technology based that it's not about just like getting out your credit card or getting out your checkbook anymore. It's really focused on how people can give in the moment, spur of the moment. And dip jar is a great example of ways you could integrate that in all events, not just your fundraising event.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. Samantha, thank you so much for your time today. This was such like an on-point topic right now. I know a lot of nonprofits are trying to get back to doing their events, hybrid, in person, staying with virtual. So I think this was awesome. And, I encourage everyone, we're going to send out all this information later today. And if you have more questions either about DipJar, get in touch with me. You can respond directly. I'm going to give you Samantha's information too. Like obviously like pass on any more questions if you want to learn more, talk to her more about some strategies. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. And Melissa, I'll make some updates so that you get everything without all
Perfect.
the missing glitches. So sorry to have so many technical issues today. I don't know what was going on, but thank you for your patience while my internet stopped and restarted.
It happens.
Have a great day,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Melissa.
Absolutely.